So in today's video, we're going to be talking about when you guys should go and buy your weekend league teams. So just before the video does start, a quick little ad on a trading service I offer over on Twitch for the cheapest trading guides out there for just £4, €4, or free with Amazon Prime. You'll receive daily trading and investing guides covering PlayStation, Xbox and PC with an array of methods covering all budgets. And I've been trading for over 10 years, making over 100 million in multiple different FIFAs, and now for the last 4 years I've made 10 million coins in just the first month. So in today's video we are going to be walking through a bunch of different players and a bunch of different budgets on when you guys should go and buy your weekend league teams. We're going to talk about when they should basically hold their value to, so can you buy them this week and use them next weekend and not lose any coins? Can you buy them now and, where you lose loads of coins? And when is basically going to be the best time to buy them? So, we've got our players basically split into 3 categories. Those categories are 0 to about 70k, 70k to about 150k, and then 150k onwards. So first off, we're going to look at the cheap players. Now the dates that I'm going to be looking at is going to be Friday the 14th. The reason for this is going to have been the second week of RTTK. Now arguably you could go and compare it to... where are we looking? Arguably you could go and look at Friday the 7th if you want to look at trends. But first off, a lot of the trends repeated from this week to Friday the 14th. And second off, I do think because we've had a whole week of promo packs where there's a lot of demands for open packs, unlike one to watch, I do think we'll see these trends. But basically, what are the trends? So the cheaper the player, or the cheap players right here, 70k and below, they basically just dropped and dropped and dropped. So that is this Friday now. He just dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. We then look at someone slightly more expensive, the likes of Alaba. And again, we look at the 14th right here. He dropped. He did actually half hold his value, but again, there was no progression right there. And he did drop from the following Friday. We look at Jude Bellingham. Jude Bellingham has been thrown in here just because I want to show you guys, for those people who think that Kanate is going to go and bang or something like that. No, for the 4k, they're not going to rise. You can see right here, he basically just held his value. Probably went up, if anything, for SBC fodder, maybe that team of the week and co. But we then moved to Alphonso Davies, same thing, cheap player. Friday the 14th, just dropped all the way through to Monday, kind of held till Monday, but then dropped for the following weekend league. Varane, now again, we are looking at players arguably slightly more expensive, but they still dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped, no holding of his price. Then moved to Conde, exact same trend. There's the 14th. They dropped, and they dropped and dropped and dropped. Now, the cheaper the player, the higher the percentage they drop. So you see that Conde, I guess, if you were to go and buy him on Saturday, only dropped 10%. Whereas if we go and look at the likes of St. Maxin, if you were to go and buy him on the Friday, he went and dropped 3k. So he went and dropped like 40%. So basically, the cheaper the player, unless there's like link investments or something, the more they should drop. So now we've gone and showed you guys the cheap players, 70k and below. We're now going to look at the players who are a little bit more expensive. I'll explain to you guys quickly as well why is this the case. This is the case because basically what happens is cheap players are packed loads. So for example, let's get this. Cheap players are packed loads, and these are cheap players. And what happens is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Someone's packed 8 cheap players, which means they have 80k. Well, what they do in FIFA is they don't keep those 10 or those 8 players. They sell those players and they go and buy one 80k player. So what this does is this increases the supply of the cheap cards, but increases the demand of the expensive cards. Which is why what we see is we see the cheap cards just drop and drop and drop as they're packed more, and they're, as people get more coins. And what we see happen is, rather than dropping, we see the more expensive cards rising. Now, what I'm showing you right now is 70 to about 150k. These players were basically neither one nor the other. So, oh yeah, by the way, the cheap players obviously can drop every single week. The mid-tier players, basically what they did is they held for about a week, and then they dropped. So look at someone like Rudiger right here again on the 14th. He dropped a little bit there, but what he then did was he held his price. And that's because there's equal amount of people buying than selling him. So for example, the average person will pack an 80k player, and then they'll buy an 80k player. And that's why someone like Rudiger or a 100k player, and that's why Rudiger holds value for 1 week, then drops, and then drops for the promo following. We look at Dembele. Dembele is a little bit cheap, but you'll see what I mean here. 75k, drops there to 66, and he holds through there 67, but drops the following weekend league. We then look at the likes of Nkunku. Nkunku kind of goes a little bit against the trend in all fairness. Friday we can see he drops here, and then he drops there. But he only does drop, what does he drop, like 11-12%, so it's not quite as bad as the really expensive cards. We then get to the likes of Theo Hernandez. Theo Hernandez, again, drops a little bit, but it's nothing too crazy because he's expensive enough. Son, I believe, is the exact same thing. 14th. Although actually Son actually dropped a little bit higher percentage. Kyle Walker, we look at Friday. 1, 2, 3. And actually Kyle Walker rose. So now that we're looking like mid-tier again, this is almost more the trend that happens with 150k players, is that we'll see them rise Thursday to Friday. So the buy time on the mid-tier players, arguably there is no buy time on the low-tier players because the later you wait, the cheaper they get. So the buy time on the mid-tier players is going to be Thursday morning with Division Rival Rewards. The idea is that they'll go up with Division Rival Rewards as there's an injection of coins and incentive to buy. There is a chance they drop marquee matchups if you're not around for Division Rival Rewards, and there is a chance of probably going by Wednesday evening if they get panic sold. But we can see that he held his value for 1-2 weeks, which was decent. We then get to Eder Militao, again same sort of player, although actually a little bit cheaper. Friday, held his value for a week and then did go and drop. So basically the mid-tier players hold their value for a mixture of 1 to 2 weeks. We then get to Salah, and now we're looking at players that are over 150k. So the idea with these players is that they will do nothing but hold / rise as a Friday. So Thursday the cheapest at 1.8, then rose and rose and rose, got better to 1.97, then hold his value for yet another week, and he got to 200, and then he dropped. So the idea is anything that is over 150k, you're going to go and buy on Thursday, and in theory you should be able to hold for 2 weeks as long as EA does not do anything out of the blue. Vinicius Jr., cheapest on Thursday, Division Rival Rewards, then held all the way for 2 weeks right there until not the next Friday but the Friday after. Sorry, 13th to the 28th. Yeah, so held for 2 weeks of basically 2 weeks from buying. Van Dijk, same sort of thing. Friday the 14th, rose for 2 weeks straight. Then moved to Lionel Messi. What did Messi do? Messi just came out of packs for RTTK. So basically there's a few players, and I've got Rafinha in a sec. If they were out of packs for RTTK, obviously they weren't in supply, and then they're going to go back in packs, which means they will drop initially, but then they do hold for that second weekend league. Rafinha is another player. If you wonder why on earth he crashed here, it's because he had a road to the knockout stage card. So players maybe like Osherman right now, who are, maybe not Osherman, maybe someone like Luis Diaz right now, who's 30, 40k. As soon as he goes back in packs next Friday, we can expect to see a massive drop because there's been no supply when everyone else has been being very heavily supplied. So back to the relatively expensive players. Lionel Messi. We then look at the absolute top tier. Again, it's basically 150k plus has the same trend. Just the more expensive the player, the safer the card is. So Neymar, again, Thursday, Friday, and he rose all the way there for 2 weeks. Finally getting to the likes of Mbappe, Friday here, rose for 2 weeks. Erling Haaland, what did Haaland do? Yeah, so Haaland had a bit of a different trend because he became extremely inflated in a small amount of time. What this meant is loads of people were holding him, and then they kind of panic sold when the hype was over. Now, I don't really know if this has happened with any players, maybe par the woman, where we've seen excessive rises despite not seeing that big of a rise. So basically what happened is we didn't see that big of a rise in the first few days. And then the lengthy meta happened, and he just absolutely boomed in price. Which means despite Haaland being obviously a 275k player, he didn't follow the normal trend because he was so hyped in such a short amount of time. And again, I'm not quite sure if that would really copy over to anyone other than maybe the woman players. The idea is that people just get bored. For a while it seemed like a really cool idea using these players, but then eventually they're like, it's not that cool. I don't think Hansen's that way. I don't think it is. I don't think we have anything this way, but that is just to show there are exceptions to the rule, and those are cards that have been very hyped in a small amount of time. And now to cover Team of the Week 1. What happened with Team of the Week 1 last year is, again, they just rose and rose and rose. So if we can grab the likes of Valverde and the likes of Heung-min Son, and we go look at the 14th, we can see that these cards just rose and rose and rose, interesting enough, to the 28th. So, which is weird because the 28th, by the way, was Outer Pack promo, which was dubbed as a relatively rubbish promo, but, the market rose one way or the other. And then we got the likes of Heung-min Son, again following the exact same trend, where we can see that as of the 14th, he just rose and rose and rose and rose. So again, if we look at Team of the Week 1, that means we can basically expect the likes of Lamptey to rise and rise and rise, Kachawa to rise and rise and rise, Salah to rise and rise and rise, Doku to rise and rise and rise, and Dybala and Lewandowski. The one thing I will say is if there is a promo card that replaces these cards, we can expect them to go down. For example, Lamptey can rise for the next like 2-3 weeks, but if we go and get an abundance of left backs and right backs in promos, then the demand for him drops off and he goes down in price. Now, heroes and icons were a little bit interesting last year because, of course, they dropped the hero pack, but the overall trend was they kind of followed the same sort of trend as the gold cards. If they are 70k or below, they are anticipated to drop with the increase in supply. If they are 70 to 150, they're anticipated to either drop a little bit, hold, or rise a little bit in the next 2 weeks. And if they're 150k plus, it is very, very rare for them to not be rising for the next 2 weeks. Now, there are a few variables that might change this. Maybe they release some insane promos, some insane SBCs, you know, that are different to last year, because of course we have Rule Breakers, if I'm not wrong, last year, which was a relatively demanded promo, but, you know, maybe they release something even more insane, who knows. But hopefully that has answered your guys' questions on when to buy your team. As I say, between watching this video and Thursday morning, the market should drop kind of on everything. Anything that is, I'd say, 150k and below probably wouldn't be worth selling and buying back. Anything 70k and below, again, is kind of doomed at this point, so I wouldn't recommend selling to look to buy back. And yeah, I mean, that hopefully has answered your questions regarding buying and selling. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you guys tomorrow with a brand new video.